Oh, they're liking them beats, boy.
This one hard, though. This one hard. This one go hard. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy.
Yeah.
Good night, villagers. All they tell on themselves.
What we tell myself is, who up for swim in the Gulf of Paria?
Not me, Dan. Not me at all. Not me at all, Jed. Let's see that footage. Let's see that footage. The drone footage, though. You see how the sea look? You see it?
I did not see the drone footage.
Dan.
Nah,
you just see it, and you know the oil is looking the ground in the road?
Yeah.
Like the Gulf.
The only video I see was the one with what you name Dippini Han. Is that her name again?
Yeah.
Fisherman friends.
Gary Aboud.
Gary Aboud.
Look like
The Aboud.
Pre-dip boy, but anyhow.
Let's see any mafia stories.
Well, everybody who out in the media have to do our pre-dip. I mean, we just do it too, you know. We do pre-dip too, you know.
You do our pre-dip, you know, make sure
it's media at the end of the day. You know, it's not real life.
I saying that because I grew up with that now, boy. Growing up in Point and Labrador, it's an oil spill on the dread. So it's nothing like that oil spill I see there is nothing, you know what I mean? It's a common thing now, and we doing nothing about it a long time. You know, so
we have been doing nothing.
You know, I listen to the video, I hear the hype, I say, all right, good. But I try to sift from it. Well, what you gonna do? And you're getting the same, you know what I mean? Okay, he likes, he shares, and hear about the business. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. Let's see. I mean, there's bringing attention to it. It at least it points the public towards that topic. You know, at the end of the day, it may be that we are spinning top in mud, but at least we know that it have a top in the mud. You know what I mean?
No, I agree. But what's the interquarter? 30 years we doing that. So we don't have anything more than that. In other words, we still dependent on
both
Kublai Singh. You understand what I'm saying? To be the one to carry the distance that it need to go then. You understand? Because it's like I remember actually driving when it had no Kublai Singh, because at least you see Kublai Singh carry it further in terms of the story of environmentalists. Good point. Exactly. Most of the people carry it to the point of, okay, you get the likes, you get the shares, you get the attention. But what I'm saying is that happening for 30 odd years now. You know what I mean? So how you carry it further, you understand what I'm saying? And you know what I mean, is it to me, it tells me that there's a fundamentally weak link in the laws that govern Trinidad and Tobago. I will say though that Trinidad and Tobago is still very advanced to have an EMA and to have an EMA Act. Very, very few small island developing states have that. So it's good that we have that infrastructure. Yeah. But the thing is that you had to look at how to strengthen it. You understand what I'm saying? Because it can't be that you're having oil spills like this and nobody had no serious consequence on that kind of thing like that, because it could have to see the kind of damage now, boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it was a lot. It was a lot. And
then
that driving up and down in the background of the video, that was quite damning to me, at least.
Well, let's see the Delta reach Trinidad,
Delta is which one? Is it India?
The Delta is the Delta. I was born in the Delta.
I believe so, Leslie.
No, but is that Brazilian or just now? Let me check and make sure. Yeah, Gamma is Brazil and Delta is India.
Well, I already know. The only Gamma I used to know was Falcon, but let me tell you, when it comes down to what the news we're talking about, let's keep hearing about the Delta variant, and that's the one that is the hot topic, and it is in Trinidad. As we speak, confirmed. And I mean, it was coming. We know it was coming. I don't know where it ends when I reach Trinidad. What do you mean? Because we had to be in it. We had to be in it. We have to be
that reach? But if that's in India, how it reach Trinidad? I mean, the Brazilian one we understand because we're so close.
Well, let's see. There's a thing called air travel, and there's another thing called
from India to
travel. believe it or not, Leslie, we did come
You
from
see
India
the
before.
Brazilian one, I understand.
It happened.
But it's still happening. No, because when borders
Well,
reopen,
as far as I see,
let's
Leslie, last time I checked, the Indian Expo was
just
closing.
repatriation.
For the 10th time, the Indian Expo was still going to close, and it's still closed. So it's still coming, right? The Indian Expo was closing for the last final sale about 5 years ago, and it's still open. So, So with this, it brings up the whole thing about what is going to be the consequences of this now, because we have heard that vaccination pre Delta ain't the same as vaccination working post Delta, if you understand. Before Delta, it was like, okay, vaccination making a kind of dent. Now it's like, yeah, them vaccine the wheel and come again, though. You understand? All right.
That's true.
Comment a little more sad news.
More sad news.
Messi gone, boy.
A little sad, boy.
Yeah.
Messi gone to Paris.
I shed a tear, fellas. I shed a tear, boy.
You shed a tear? It had men with no ball. I'm sure they ball. They say they ball, but they ball.
Boy, right now, as a man, I don't like things like sedition and things, fellas, but right now, somebody had a bondong Bartomeu house or something, boy. I mean, somebody had to take things drastic, fellas, because that Barca board, they forced the best player out. You understand what I'm saying? How the men could do that? You understand? They're talking because they're talking mafia, financial fair play. What about the rest of clubs? All the rest of clubs didn't lose their best. I mean, some people could say that's probably why Ronaldo had leave Real and go Juventus. But
I would say
I feel if they wanted.
What is going on is Barto them spend money bad during them tenure. So when the money spent bad,
when they're on a high.
Exactly.
There's a pride before the fall, my friends.
Exactly.
There's a pride before the fall.
Who spend money worse than Real Madrid? But Real Madrid ain't losing money. But you're quite right. What they're saying is that it's because Barca lose so much last year. The returns end up coming when the revenue so much compared to the wage bill. We end up getting caught up. But the thing is, they're trying to blame La Liga, but I don't feel it's La Liga.
It all started with one game against AS Roma, and it has never been the same. Anyway, it has never been the same since. All right.
Now pull up that dregs from that
thing. Cutter.
So let's leave it on that note and get into today's.
But they have salary cap in La Liga now. But yeah, let me get on with today's episode.
So a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago or so, I would say, we initiated a conversation here in the Heights Room, one that focuses on the LGBTQ community in Trinidad and Tobago. And that episode was very well received due to our intention to market it as far as possible to see what we could get out of that episode for the masses. It went to an astronomical place in the media sphere, which is the zone that brings back a lot of feedback and a lot of heat. And we knew that we could not have left it right there, And today, we are continuing this discussion. All right? So today's topic, continuing that discussion, but getting more streamlined now, is equal place. Living the LGBTQI experience in TNT now, living the experience we're going to talk about today. What is really going on with those who are within the community? What are they experiencing? You understand what we're saying? And to unpack this today, we have two lovely guests. I must say so myself. Now, I'm just trying to pull up the info here. Just give me a second. First up, we have Renelle White. Renelle is an unapologetic Indo-Caribbean feminist. She has tutored for a period of 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, at the Institute for Gender and Development within UE. And she's also a director at the Silver Lining Foundation, which they will tell us about more in a few minutes. We also have from the Silver Lining Foundation, Mr. Scott Marchak. Scott is an undergraduate psychology student at, I believe it's UWI, and he is passionate about activism for and on behalf of the LGBTQ community. And he facilitates as a volunteer and clinical outreach at the Silver Lining Foundation. So good night, Scott, and good night, Renel, and welcome to the Heights Room. You know you was coming sooner than later.
Yeah. Hi, good night,
Hey, everyone.
Thanks for having us here.
Thanks for coming.
Really appreciate the opportunity, to be here. I see in some of our supporters, Scott, one of your friends here, Joseph. Hi, Chrissia. I miss you. I miss our astronomy nights. I don't know what we're going to do about it in the lockdown. Picking up the SNF and all of that. So thanks everybody who logged on and who logged in, and hopefully we could have a healthy, progressive, chill conversation about equality and, finding an equal place in our multicultural society that we live in. Yeah.
So last time we asked, is Trinidad ready for equality? And we couldn't unpack it in one episode, and we're going to continue now. And before we get into this issue of equality and what's really going on with this equal place that is sung about in our anthem, right? Tell us a little bit about the Silver Lining Foundation right now.
Right. Okay. So the Silver Lining Foundation operates on 3 pillars, right? We are an NGO. We are an NGO that deals with primarily or focuses on bullying and harassment amongst LGBTI youth in particular. We operate on 3 pillars: support, educate, and advocate. So we're here to give that support to young people, young LGBTI persons who may have been or are currently struggling with their sexual orientation, struggling with, coming out or being their unapologetic, genuine, authentic selves. We also educate through activism, through various different programs around what is gender, sexuality, identity, the LGBTI experience, and also, of course, advocating for the society to really be more, accommodating, not tolerant. That word tolerant, we could unpack that a little bit,
For sure.
I don't like to use that word tolerant. You understand? Right. So, but let me not get too carried away, because Israel heights something going on.
We can reach there. We're reaching there.
I tend to reach some little heights sometimes. But yeah, so the Silver Lining Foundation was founded in 2014, I believe.
Thereabouts.
Yeah, thereabouts. So I think. Oh, Jeremy would be so upset. No.
Jeremy, if you're watching, help me in the comments now, brother. Help me in the comments.
Celebrating 10 years. Me and date something sometimes, Jers. But yeah, so that is what we do. And our executive director, every time I talk about the Silver Lining Foundation, I have to mention him. I have to say his name. 9 years, Brandon. Thank you very much. I think next year will be 10, the big 10. But I have to always mention Jeremy Stefan Edwards, the executive director and founder of the Silver Lining Foundation, right? And the reason that he decided to do this and have this foundation is because of an incident that happened a few years ago, where a young boy in school, what school it was that he went to? You remember? CIC. George Kassanjian, he committed suicide because he was being bullied and harassed. We can't say for sure if it was because of his LGBTI self-defined orientation, but definitely, yeah, bullying and harassment based on how he was perceived. So that's another thing that we could talk about later on.
Yeah.
That in schools, we have found that in schools, through our survey, that persons are bullied and harassed not only because of their LGBTI identity, but because of how they are perceived. So if you're going to all school and you're playing football with the fellas and them in presentation and thing, oh God, you're gay, what happened to you? How to be gay?
Yeah, so I mean...
Let's get into that one time. Yeah, let's get into that. So you all do outreach into schools, all right?
Yeah.
Take it away, Scott.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add to that and say that homophobia we think about is usually this thing that is a concern of LGBT queer folks, but not necessarily. Homophobia is really something that everybody is really a victim of, whether or not it is you're gay, straight, bi, whatever you identify as. That's the culture that we have here. That's that's how masculinities works. And we're gonna unpack that, and Ronell would be able to, in particular, talk a little more about that.
Yeah, definitely. And just to reiterate too, a very important point. Yes, I know that we are talking about the LGBTI community and so on, but homophobia is something that doesn't only affect negatively the LGBTI population, but also men and masculinity, right? And it has
very true. Very true.
Because from my gendered experience and knowledge and education, I have read so many studies and writings and theories that speak about masculinity as homophobia, and as Brandon is saying here, so we have one of our biggest supporters always here to support and add, that homophobia affects our relations to one another, right? Yeah. How we react, how we interact, how we bond. And it's interesting
people don't see that,
you're talking about Messi, and in the Copa finals, I mean, Neymar lost. I'm a Neymar fan, right? So I'm glad that he on PSG now, so I can see two of them play together.
Right.
But
okay.
Cry. The man will cry on the field, and he always is very emotional.
Pain.
Yeah, we see a lot of these male football players, when they lose or they're feeling passionate about something or positive or happy, they would let the emotions go. And we would look at that and be like, yes, nice, right? Because this is how homophobia works and how privilege works. In that space, you're already being athletic, so you're already being so masculine. So it's fine.
You have that freedom.
What about when they jump up on each other and hug up each other and man wrap wrong, he leg wrong next to them and holding them so? Right, that's normal.
In the gender courses that I would have done when the only gender course I did was men and masculinities. Great course. If you're going to UE, if you're going to UE, do men and masculinities as an elective, right? They talk about these things. Those spaces are, what the term that they use for it is very homoerotic, right? Not in the sense that necessarily there's any, a gay or homosexual sexual interaction, but the sense that there's this male and very masculine camaraderie among these men, right? Yes. And it's okay to slap each other bottom and roll up. Do like that, right? Because that happens within a particular space and context.
Because I know he's running on the field. You get a slap bottom
right? So yeah, and when you think about it, right? When you think about it from that perspective, once you could understand that, you will see that really this idea of like masculine and feminine, this binary as we call it, is really a fallacy. Is not real. It's something that we make up for ourselves.
Definitely.
A construct, a social construct, as we say, right?
Some people say they're changing the electives and thing already.
So I wanna get back into the outreach into schools, right? So the Silver Lining Foundation goes into schools, and you all have a climate survey that you all conduct at these schools. And when you go into the education system, when you go into a school and you have to deal with its norms, which are many times very archaic, and tell us about how that goes, and the fact that we live in a, for want of a better term, homophobic nation, right? That's our thing. That's one of our things, right? What is the experience when you go to a school to address students like the one you highlighted from CIC, who exists in every school? What's going on when you guys go there?
Right. So the National School Climate Survey, the first one happened in 2016. That was when we had the first launch. And we are in the process right now. Every 3 years we want to do it, right? To really feel out the climate, anything changing, anything different, is it the same, any progression and whatnot. And together with that, so I just want you all to know that together with going to the schools and getting the data, we also do teacher training, right? We had about 4 cycles of a teacher training program where we try to train the teachers to not bully, to be able to deal with conflict better, conflict resolution, restorative justice as opposed to punitive punishment, understanding sexuality and gender identity, not so they wouldn't tell the gay boy or the lesbian girl or the person who is not, performing their gender like what society should, wants them to be. So they won't tell them, hey, take down your gay now. Take it down. Stop acting so girly. Stop acting so manly. They gonna stop harassing you if you take it down, right? So we also do the teacher training program to try to redefine how teachers themselves, right, see and perceive identity and sexuality and being. So we did 2016. We're gonna launch it 2019 at the end of this month. So log on to Silver Lining, all our socials, you'll see it. So what we do when we go, we want to get a gauge of bullying based on sexual orientation, so LGBTI bullying. We want to gauge gender-based violence as well, because homophobia, harassment, bullying, all of these things count as gender-based violence, right? What we found when we went to these schools is that a lot of people said, yes, they are bullied, but they are also the ones who bullying as well, right? So you see that kind of vicious cycle going on.
Yeah,
right? Different types of bullying take place in different school settings. You would see certain dynamics in an all-boys school, certain dynamics in an all-girls school, certain dynamics in mixed schools as well. Yeah. And that clearly points to how we learn socio-cultural norms, right, about gender relations and so on.
And to speak to that a little bit about what you're saying in engaging in that cycle of receiving but also giving, this kind of bullying, gender-based violence and bullying, it has a lot to do with, again, like masculinity, particularly within boys' schools. I mean, once you're the receiver of that, you're also going to be the giver of it, because you're also trying to show, it's basically like you're trying to show that you're trying to gain respect from your fellow peers, like, and you're also trying to distance yourself as much away to the from the idea of being queer, because it's met with so much social undesirability that you now have to be very vehemently against it, to the point where it is violence, where it is you're saying all these slurs and fighting with people and trying to just be as far away from it as possible so that you could essentially survive, really, and navigate this space.
Right.
Right. Before we get any further, I wanted to ask a question. Well, a couple of questions. Somebody also had one of the questions I asked. So, like, you did a survey. How many schools were you guys able to get into?
Right. Yeah. So I see Swati. Yeah, she's asking about it. Brandon replied to it. It was over 30 schools. It was actually 44 schools across the entire country. I tell you, we went from Blanchisseuse, Cedros, presentation, Shogona, San Fernando, Naps, Central, everywhere, North Manzanilla. We really tried to get a broad base, right?
Were you guys able to go to Tobago by chance?
Yes, we did. We did go to Tobago. We went to Scarborough. Yeah, we went to Brandon and I went to Tobago.
Scott missed that flight.
Yeah, we missed that flight.
Hard luck, Scotty.
Right, so yes, we did go to Tobago as well, and we have our executive director here on the live, Mr. Jeremy Edwards, and he's dropping some data and some info, so you all could go ahead and check out the comments there, and you'll see what he has to say. But yeah, so the process, you all were asking about the process.
Yes, what about the process to get in the school?
Yeah. So how that went?
Was challenges.
The challenges, the red tape from the ministry, right? You know why we started to do the survey? The Minister of Education at the time, those couple years ago, said, what? Bullying, harassment, that don't happen in schools? Gay people, that don't exist either. Like, what is that? So the denial, right? Where's the data? How do you prove this? So Jeremy was like, you know what? We need to go in the schools. And we had a really hard time because we couldn't have put bullying, LGBTI on the front. I wish I had some surveys. They packed away nothing downstairs. But we couldn't put that on the title, on the cover at all, right? So we have to be very careful, right, with how we went in, because it is a very difficult system to access, as Brandon says. And people don't want to open up to acknowledging the fact that there is bullying and harassment, because some believe that they are the LGBTI population deserves to be
exactly
harassed out of being gay or being queer. So it's like, it do exist. Let's just leave everybody to do what they have to do to get that out of them so we could change the system, because heteronormativity, right? That is a norm. So it was really difficult to go through the ministry. We had a lot of help from UNESCO. We have to big up UNESCO, right?
I just want to say to keep in mind that, I mean, Ronell saying that you can see how homophobia on a sociocultural level, you know, between it just being peers at school, then translated becoming an issue to even do this type of research on a systemic, on an institutional level, you know. So we're not only seeing it, we're not only seeing homophobia just happening like, hey, here's a so and so and a so and so and a batty boy and anti man, and you know, all the colloquial terms that we have for these things. Let
me ask this, just out of curiosity, and it could be very brief. You don't have to go into the whole presentation. But when you enter a school, right, you all address, you know, the students in, like, you know, a hall or whatever. How do you all explain to them, how do you all represent homosexuality to them? Like when you are trying to enlighten them about it, because we know what is the norm and the normal thinking. How do you all bring that difference to them in a brief way?
Right. So let me just make it very clear that when we go into the schools to do the survey, we have no space to give any expose or talk about silver lining in any great detail or anything like that.
Really?
They come to the survey, what we notice, the teachers, the principal place so much priority and emphasis, or they're taken away from the school time, or they're taken away from the math class,
education,
or they're taken away from the English class, because this is what they're doing not important.
Yeah.
Right? So from that experience, we see that there is so much more importance placed on the regurgitating schoolwork, the academics, but what about the mental health? What about the healthy
and the emotional
and
intelligence? Somebody was just speaking about, you know, teaching empathy and emotional intelligence within schools. That's not something we really put value on as a culture. You know, it's more like, right, learn this, memorize it, regurgitate it, right? You know, so that is something to think about.
This guy is right. He said, Jason says, drop your survey. That's how it was.
Yeah,
we have to leave. A lot of times the students would want to talk, and they would talk and say, hey, this is how
because you're engaging with them in that way, and they have things to say.
This teacher is do this, and this teacher, but we have one teacher who does stand up for we and thing, you know. But you know, he does also get some little flack from the other teachers in the staff room and thing too. So you have the support in the system. I'm not saying that all teachers are homophobic, they're bad, they're not supportive, not at all. Not saying that at all. And what we notice as well is that the younger generation, because this would be, we surveyed students from Form 4, 5, and 6. And so from that age range, let's say like 14 to 18, 19, right? And we see that some of them, it's like polar opposites, could be very homophobic on one end, and some could be very progressive and liberal on the other. Some might say, hey, I am being bullied and harassed. I like that all they come in the schools and doing this. And, you know, I have some friends who just pick up for me, but I then have some other people who's real beyond me. And when I try to talk to the teachers, they don't listen, and they say I had to just get over it. But I can't function in school because I'm being bullied and harassed. So how am I going and do my schoolwork? And then when I go home, my parents also harassing me, bullying me, and it's not a safe space at home either.
And then how do we now? Yeah, of course. And that does contribute to a deteriorating mental health as well. So, of course, one of the intersections, one of the other pillars I would say in SLF is also to advocate for the mental health of LGBT persons. So, it's, you know, something to think about. Mental health,
definitely.
Which is something already taboo in the Caribbean as well, right? Mental health is not something we recognize, and if you try to nurture your mental health, is also like that is you know, that's not a thing. Like that is
anything to do with mental health is you need God in Trinidad. You don't pray enough. You don't pray enough.
See, and you brought up that. Let me just tell you, we have a campaign going on with Silver Lining, right? Conversion therapy, to end conversion therapy and raise awareness of conversion therapy. We know conversion therapy, like if you follow like international media and stuff and so on, is something very psychological, and you know, they would go to try to convert and whatnot. But in Trinidad and in the Caribbean, we engage in conversion therapy through fundamental religious practices, like you said, Kata.
Sure.
I'm going to pray the gay away. Let me take you to church. Let me carry any mosque. Let me carry you by the imam and the pundit and this and that, to try to convert and get her out of you as if it is a demon in your soul.
There you go.
But let me ask something, guys. Because I mean, hats off for doing such a large survey. I mean, having done research myself, I know that's very difficult to do, and I'm very happy about the fact that you included Cedras. I'm actually from Cedras, so I can tell you that most of the times Cedras is after. Which school in Cedras did you all do? Was it Cedras Composite? Was it
Lexia wasn't there, don't worry.
It's a secondary school, right? Obviously.
Yes,
secondary school.
Jeremy, was serious high?
Yeah. I'm not sure what his name is, but
yeah, because they're changing names now.
Yes, they're changing names. Yeah.
Yes, we don't have composite anymore.
Yeah, it could be Cedras Government Secondary now.
Yeah.
Right.
It could be Cedras Government Secondary now.
You know, that was a nice experience. It was a nice experience for us. It was a cultural shock.
Right.
I was like, wow.
Yes. So if you could just, because the things that comes with these research is trends, right? So what has been your experience in terms of what you've seen in what we consider prestige schools versus non-prestige or public schools, one, and two, rural and non-rural schools? Because I went to Cedras Government as primary. My mom and dad taught in Cedras Composite. Then I went Point Fortin Senior, and then in A-level I did Naparima. So I had all this we had bullying, and I went through bullying in different scales, but I could tell you that rural city thing is a big one as well.
Yeah,
if you could unpack them heights for us.
Definitely. I mean, like I said, it was a culture shock. I went to a prestigious school. I went to a convent. Scott went to a prestigious school.
Yeah.
He went to Fatima as well, you know, and he could, I would like him to tell you about his experience, you know, in the schools. But we see that, you know, it's very interesting, the dynamic. And like I tell you, it was a cultural shift, right? It was a cultural shock for me, and Jeremy as well, because we both did it together, right? But what we notice is that in the prestigious schools, in the denominational schools, there's so much more of a like secrecy, right? They try to hide so much things. They don't want people to know this and that. This is not going on in the hallowed halls of the prestigious convents and so on, right? So there's so much more of secrecy. I'm not saying that in these schools there's like less or more homosexuality or anything like that, or less or more LGBTI persons. It's basically
treated differently.
It's treated differently, but it's basically the same sort of ratio. And with these denominational schools, we see that
there's a religious component.
And they are almost driven by the fear of shame. Right? Shame and taboo. Right? Again, because shame, guilt, fear, because of you know, that whole idea that religion, and we go back to last week, how much weeks ago, you know, this natural law, religious, anglicized kind of way of thinking and seeing things. So when we went to the mixed schools or the non-denominational schools, what we noticed there was that there was a lot more gender-based violence itself, especially things like a lot of the girls said that they were unaware of if they were being sexually abused. They were unaware of what consent was, right? You know, being in a mixed school, they were not sure if advances that boys were making were actually like abusive or sexually abusive.
Which is why we also realize how important it is and how much needed comprehensive sexual education is, because when we think about sex education, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the act of sex alone, but also to recognize that, you know, what is consent? Something so simple as consent, you know. If you know, you touch somebody, does that mean that, you know, that person has to do something else? So, you know, things like that. And you know, things like not assuming what we call blanket consent. Just because you do one thing, the person like you do one thing, don't mean that they want you to do something else, so consent is our ongoing process that you must always ask, is this okay? Does this feel okay?
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
That was just a little segue.
Yeah, someone said something here, like that is we culture. Yes.
Yeah.
We create norms. You say it's a cultural norm, it's Trinity thing, it's fine, it's fine, It's a rite of passage, bullying and all that'll make you stronger.
Yeah.
Especially especially for young boys. Because again, we are training them how to be men, how to be macho.
And when you look at the survey, of course, it's not surprising when we see the results show that more boys tend to also, again, be the perpetrators of gender-based violence, of bullying, of these types of things, right?
Yep. But also we saw that in the all-girls schools, not to be on boys and men and all of that all the time. But I mean, you know where I'm coming from, because this is part of the patriarchal experience, right? But in the all-girls schools, there's a lot of cyberbullying, right? Which is a form of passive harassment, passive bullying. You would see a lot of slut shaming as well, because young girls and women tend to slut shame other women and girls. Again, coming from that patriarchal system.
So sometimes we think that, just because you're a woman that you must have like these feminist ideals, but of course sometimes women too can be perpetrators of the patriarchy as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Do you get a sense though that the idea of bullying has happened is almost like it's a growing phenomenon, in that it's something that starts up wherever people feel marginalized. So in the sense of I could tell you I myself experienced some of it going to these mixed schools where they quick to call out, well, you're a nerd, or or you know what I mean, and they quick. I mean, even when I went to NAPS, I remember a few people say, "Yeah, you are nerdy." When you mix with other schools, you get that kind of pressure. So So in other words, it's kind of whatever the norm is. The bullying then comes in on that, and that mechanism then is a funny thing to manage.
Yeah, let me tell you something else that came out of our survey, because we had options, right, for the students to tick the different areas that they were bullied, right? And up on this day and age, up to today, people are still being bullied based on them wearing the brand name shoes like everybody else. They don't have hairstyle like everybody else, their physical appearance, body shaming. Come on, it still happens. You're not rich or wealthy, you're living in a poor area.
For sure.
To young students, I was shocked to know that today, boy, that happened 20 years ago. How old am I? Yeah, that happened 20 years ago when I was in school, right? I went to Cougar Convent, which is a rural area. It's not like Tongue Convent or anything like that, right? And things like this happen. They have cliques still. So you still have cliques in school. You still have schools in the West discriminating based on geography and socioeconomic background.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
I'm saying you live in Pasig Light.
Yeah, you pass it
well.
If you're not going Pres, Naps Convent, well, you're not bright, or you're this, you're that. You don't
I
want
can't tell you how many times people think that when they hear like how I speak sometimes, they figure that because I could articulate myself well, I could speak what it is I'm trying to say. They automatically ask me, what school you went to? I thought so. I thought you went to educated, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is, that is like how it is, so we dealing with this homophobia, and then there's the classism right there next to it. You understand?
Which is important to note, because of course there are intersections of these things too.
Right.
Homophobia don't happen alone by itself, right? It's happen, it's intersect with race, class, all of these things. And even not to, me saying this is not what is I'm trying to say, like be good, say something
inflammatory
bad about our own LGBT community, but also it is to highlight that there are also injustices, prejudice, discrimination that has happened within our own LGBT community.
That might be a shock to some people to hear that queer people could be homophobic. Queer people could be transphobic. Queer people commit domestic violence. Queer people commit acts of the GBV. Queer people commit acts of sexual abuse, right?
For like viewers who that would be surprising news. What would I guess now I confuse now. What like I guess queer on queer phobia look like? What does that look like?
For sure.
We see it on Grindr all the time, so you'll.
So for those who
There you go.
Grindr is the gay version of Tinder.
Tinder, yeah.
Yes.
And so a lot of the times you will see things.
Horrendous.
A lot
They
of
would
the
say
times.
like no Indian, no blacks.
Yeah, but also
Right?
things like
No
no
femme.
femme. Hashtag mask for mask.
Mask
They only
for
want
mask.
masculine looking men, right?
Wow, it's
You must
crazy.
sometimes, guys tell me they would message me and then they would see my picture and then they'll be like, well, you're looking a little too femme for me, I only want big strapping masculine looking men. That's what they want.
Well,
right?
I mean,
the wrong program, man.
I mean, but in a way, it could say that's just their preference too. If
No, right.
that's
That's
the
a
thing.
really good point, huh?
Mhm.
Because we could go that route and say, well, that's preference, that's opinion and whatnot. But to actually place it out there on a platform like that, right?
True.
And actually
tend to shame.
devalue.
Yeah.
You know what's
Mhm.
different? The difference is when you start to devalue
Yeah.
things that are
Bodies,
different of
different
certain bodies.
identities,
And say, no, you do
shame.
this and do that. Right? So it's prejudice, like Brandon is saying.
yeah.
Prejudice is different from a preference. I have a preference in men too, but I know the value. You understand? All bodies
Yeah,
are
it's tricky. It's tricky in that regard. But it come like when a well-known guy come and say, if he dislike a race of people, that is just his opinion.
Right.
A certain man said that,
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, look, Swati said here, preference is rooted in misogyny. And I
Yeah,
like
and
that
that's
she
a good
brought
point.
in that whole idea of misogyny.
Yeah, because we realize that misogyny, sexism, all of these things also go hand in hand with homophobia. And a lot of the times, we talk about the idea of homophobia, but also heterosexism.
Right.
The idea that the right way, right, the natural law
The natural
is to be heterosexual and
Is
to
to be
engage in
heterosexual.
heterosexual things.
Well,
which
now
might
we
not
talking.
necessarily be sex, because again, intersections, they have certain things that are also affiliated with being heterosexual and also just being the ideal human,
Yeah.
right? Which is a fallacy that
It
none
is.
of us can fit
What
into.
is that? You're looking for
What the hell is
unicorns?
that?
You're chasing unicorns, y'all. You know? But yeah, misogyny, that idea that they say like no femmes, mask for mask and all of that. Think about it. That devalues womanhood and femininity, and that's why it is problematic. Right?
Yeah,
They wouldn't
yeah.
say no macho man or no mask or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Right? So that whole idea of no femmes and mask for mask.
Yeah, you see, I have this.
Within that system, it prioritizes maleness, hyper-masculinity so much and devalues femininity and being woman and all that. So if you as a gay man, have some feminine or female qualities, because we all have it as humans, we are devalued. You all are devalued because of that. And that is sexism and prejudice.
And it might not even just be because you are a gay man. You might just naturally be more feminine, more sensitive, more emotional, whatever, as a man in general, regardless of your sexual identity. And people will still find a way to, devalue that.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
When you all bring up this whole story and say it was getting confusing, but I understand what you're saying now. And my little hot take on that is that no matter what community you belong to, you're human and you could still be an asshole. You know what I mean? And I think that
I agree.
And some people, that's just like they say they have I think today's world, it's just like you are emboldened to be that, because it's all about, it normalized to be like that. Now, this brings us, you just talked about the natural law and thing and morality and thing. And, it really brings me back to the last episode that we had, right? The last episode that we had based on this topic when we interviewed Terence Bhagwan Singh and James Lancer. And James Lancer brought a lot of his takes on the topic, and he passed a lot of it off as fact, whereas I would say a lot of it would have been his opinions on the topic, which, everyone is entitled to their opinion. But there's a bit of a danger when you start to pass it off as fact, I would say. I would like to hear your guys' take on that episode. And first, starting off with this issue of the natural law and that there's this moral code that exists that champions heteronormativity. What do you all have to say about that?
I will let Scott talk on this, right? Because I know I said a lot. I will let him talk on it. This is something that we, as friends in casual conversation, right? This is what we talk about all the time. We hanging out, we chilling, we talk about these things. I just want to show you all, right? I have 2 books here. Foucault, right? The History of Sexuality, right? And I mean, I have so much. You want to talk about facts, you want to talk about studies and whatever. We have it, right? We have it. It is perspective. It is different epistemologies, which is ways of knowing. And how do you ask yourself? How you come to know what you know? Who tell you that? What is fact? This idea of absolute truth is a fallacy.
It's a fallacy.
It is colonial, and we could debunk that. Scott, what do you think about the episode?
Yeah, I mean,
Scott can watch it.
I mean,
let me start on the natural law. Let's start on that because the episode had a lot of things that we could get into. Let's start on this thing about the natural law and this moral code that runs through humanity.
Yeah,
what's that?
As far as I'm concerned, what I mainly want to say about that, this idea of the natural law and science, a lot of things are quote unquote unnatural. Us talking here on this little computer here, this is unnatural. This is a man-made thing, right? Natural is a phenomenon that happens within nature, right? All of this is man-made. Pharmaceuticals, man-made. The jab everybody taking, the jab everybody taking, right? That is unnatural. That is man-made science that we made. But do we place value, or rather, do we devalue those things and say, no. Well, hello, some people doesn't want to
take it. Let me know what you vaccine. Let me say Panadol. Let me say Panadol, right? Let me take it and keep it simple.
When you have a stink headache and you take that Panadol, boy, right? You feel, oh, yes, right, this is the right Panadol is a good thing, right? The idea of it being natural or unnatural is not the reason why that individual was trying to just justify so much why it is wrong and why it's right. It has nothing to do with natural or unnatural. You just don't like a certain individual. You don't like LGBT persons or whatever it is. Your arguments are based on very biased moral ways of thinking, right? And that's okay because we all do it. We all have certain mythologies, I like to say, right? Certain things that we base opinions on. Some people, not everybody is scientifically literate, I will say, right? And the hard fact is you're coming with all these excuses, all of these justifications, and it's just that I would have more respect for any person that just outright said, I just don't like it because I don't like this identity, and it's coming from a very heterosexist place as well, as Brandon is saying. So let's jump into that, right? He is assuming that, of course, heterosexism and being heterosexual is the way to go, right? And that anything outside of that is invalid, right? It's not right, it's wrong, and of course, it's immoral, right? And that's the thing. That is his assumption, right? That is what he believes to be true, but not everybody else. Sure, right?
In talking about it, he talked about. Renelle, you want to touch on the natural law before I get into the next thing that you talked about?
Yeah, let me just add a little bit to that. So we in the Caribbean, we have a history of being colonized, right? Or you don't forget that. Don't ever forget that, right? Don't forget that we consume, right, so much of what we think is normal and the way to be that actually is put to us through a very colonized Anglocentric lens, right? Anglicized Western thinking, right? And that is what this person was talking about when referring to natural law, right? But who is to say that the West or the European way of thinking is the right way, the absolute way to be, right? So we have a sense of moral superiority, moral supremacy, right? All goes back to white privilege, all goes back to colonized thinking, right? What about persons from different cultures who have different realities? It's that simple. who have different truths.
It's supremacist and
What about
imperialist.
what about the Hydras of India, the third gender? What about
Imusha.
the ladyboys of Thailand, right? Across the globe in all these different countries and places.
And for the record, the Hydra in India are recognized third gender by the government.
Yeah. And before Christianity, listen, you all need to decolonize all your mind, and that is the heights. If you want to bring heights to the show, decolonize your thinking and decolonize your mind, because so much of what we know is this colonized brainwashing, right? I know it's not gonna happen overnight. Just so the clothes and thing we wearing is Western clothes and thing. I didn't put on my saree and my Bindian thing today, right? But let me tell you, it's funny, but I do, because that is part of me living my decolonized Indo-Caribbean life as well, right?
For sure.
So when people want to come and say yes, moral superiority and moral, what is morality? Morality is relative. Natural law is relative. What does it mean to be natural? Why? Because Christian people say so, and fundamentalist Christianity says so. What is sin, evil? And these things are social constructs. Yeah. Social constructs that were created to benefit a certain group in society. Why? We could go down a long road in this book here, The History of Sexuality. We could go down a long road to really try to unpack and deconstruct ideas around monogamy and all of that too. Ideas around male and female coupling, marriage and all these things. For economic reasons. It has nothing to do with morality.
Yeah. Marriage is relatively new within.
Marriage is a social construct.
So let's pull in a very nuclear part of that discussion that happened before. And I want to bring it in here in relation to our discussion of morality and how we define good. Because one of the things that I thought was very sharp and very smart, what Terence did, is that initially Lancer was talking about it, and he said, well, he immediately pulled away from religion and said, well, no religion, because Terence then said, well, I wouldn't talk from a Christian perspective, I would talk from a Hindu perspective, where that is okay, so if it is you use religion, that is not justification for that. So if it is you come outside of the sphere of religion and you trying to define good and not good, the argument was then brought in, that was I still think a very offensive argument, that we start to talk of the queries of sin and not sin, and then he started to talk about murder. And that murder is then equivalent to this sin or no sin. So if you're saying that there's no sin, then are you saying murder is okay? So there was this sort of parallel that gets sucked into that. And, the argument was a very nebulous space to carry the conversation. But I want to bring it back here for us to add that clarity, because that to me is like level 3 of the heights, and I think we could lend some clarity to that.
I think this is gonna get. I mean, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of it, this is going to get.
Let me go.
This is going to be heights.
Let me go.
One of my friends
heights on the show.
One of my friends bringing a little heights here. Why is it either male or female or hermaphrodite? Naturally not so. So yeah, I think let me pull on that a little bit, right? Let's pull on that point a little bit there. Right, so it's trying to show that in nature, plants, animals, right, naturally, we gender things. We impose that Western anglicized kind of notion onto things, right? Look, I have a dog here. He only coming in and out of the room, right? And sometimes I just want to put on clothes and things for him, right? And it's like, you wanna gender the dog too, right? You wanna treat the female dog girly, you wanna treat the male dog manly, right? And it's like, they don't know anything of that. We gender things so much, but if we look to nature and we really open our eyes and take that fuzz, that fog off in front of your eyes, you would see in nature naturally, if you don't talk natural law, so much of it is in between, right? Here, there, everywhere. You have things like, male, female plants, something existing in one thing. You have...
So let's touch a bit on Leslie's point regarding the equation of murder and homosexual sin is equal sin, I guess.
Yeah, because without religion, the question is, Right. So without religion, the question is how have that compass for right and wrong, good and bad,
Right.
morality.
So
What
So
do
let's
you
say
use
it.
to
Yeah.
anchor that?
I always say more than morals, what's more important to me is being ethical, right? Morally, you can say, oh, well, yeah, being gay, being LGBT is wrong. But ethically, you wouldn't say something like that because it causes harm. When you say those things, you are planting, right, these seeds of discrimination, prejudice, stereotypes in people's minds, right? So even if you're not outright saying, oh, well, yeah, I don't like these people and
Right.
whatever, I want to get rid of them and all these things, right?
So
You are still in a
right.
way promoting a microaggression when you think about it.
Right. So what you saying there, Scott? Okay, so we're on level 4 of the heights there. You just bumped way up to the next level. You brought us into the issue of ethics, the concept of ethics,
Yeah.
which I think is where the conversation have to go. So now we're saying that division of good and bad starts to be anchored in ethics.
Yeah.
What drives ethics?
Well, okay, so how I differentiate it, how they teach us at the University of the West
Universities,
Indies, right?
yes.
In SciMed Tech, when they teach us about scientific literacy.
In
and all.
yoga, they teach us ahimsa, which is non-violence.
Ahimsa,
Which I
yes,
think
yes.
I follow that.
We follow that, of
I follow
course.
the Buddhist principle of life.
Uh-huh.
Very nice,
Yeah.
nice. Very glad to hear that. But what differentiates it is that morality tends to be more rooted in more personal opinions, right? Whether it's informed by religion or culture in general, whatever it is, right? But when we speak about ethics, we generally are speaking about something that is more widely accepted than our cultural and our personal opinion, right? We're talking about fundamentally, we know that killing a man is wrong, it's unethical, you know?
So it's a transcendent level of morality, more or less. Ethics is, it transcends culture, it
I think it's
transcends.
a lot more complex, and I think Renelle gonna try to get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I am happy that you all brought up ethics. You brought up ethics because there's a distinction, right, between ethics and morality. Now, again, what is morality? Why is morality rooted in religion? What about atheist people? What about people?
But what about the morality that, let's say, so we're trying to do right now, because we're trying to kind of play a kind of roundabout devil's advocate here and bring back what he says. So here, right? Let me put aside religion. Let me say it have morals that need to be understood in a society. Why is it that people would think? Obviously, we know that's a real question. What is morality? So why do people think, generally speaking, why is there so much homophobia worldwide then? Because when persons like him say it's an understood thing, it's because there's homophobia all over. What is the reason for this type, and why does it branch on morality? Let's say people have their things to do with religion. The ethics now come into play. So what is really going on here with the morality and this homophobia? Where is that strength coming from for homophobia?
Right. So from a gendered and a feminist perspective, and I'm saying this because this is where I come from, right? Other people come from different various backgrounds and whatnot. But from a gendered and a feminist perspective, people are obsessed with sex and sexuality and penis and vagina and what you do with it.
That's true.
Right? Yeah. Plain and straight. You know what a gender reveal is? A gender reveal is telling people, hey, my child have a vagina, my child have a
I find that so much shit.
And it's also, that's not even the correct term, because what you're really trying to say
is a sex reveal.
This is a sex reveal. It's not a gender reveal. Gender is what we put onto the child, right?
So to continue from that, why are we so obsessed? Because we place globally, right, the Western and the European influences. It is global, right? This is what we call imperialism. This is what we call colonialism. It is these isms, right? Where we place so much emphasis on procreation, right? We place so much emphasis on reproduction and making babies. And if you engage in any type of sexual acts that don't result in that had to be moral or wrong. So it goes back to that whole idea of what is sex and sexuality, that what is our bodies for, what we use it for, right? It goes back to this whole principle and this idea of biopower as well. What type of power we give to certain bodies that do certain things and what kind of power we take away from it. So the idea of reproduction, there's always called that into the argument all the time, right? It's wrong because it not resulting in a child, right? But so that means all the gay people, all the gay men that having anal sex are wrong. But heterosexual people, men and women, engage in anal sex all the time, and sometimes even more maybe than gay men, because some gay men don't.
But also, I mean, it's also centered in sex that is penetrative as well, right? Sex, of course, we know doesn't always have to be penetrative as well. Sometimes we don't even use our body parts. Sometimes we use things to assist the process as well, and all of those things are not really given any value under what Renelle is speaking about, right?
Right. So you see that immorality now, where does it center around? This obsession with procreation and that male-female dynamic, because the dichotomy, because society and the Eurocentric and Western values say, well, your bodies are different and they are made, this is how they to fit into each other, male and female, to create something. So that obsession with the creation and all of that and reproduction, it has so much to do with how we perceive morality around sexuality, because we're talking sexual morality here in particular with the LGBTI community.
Right. So let me continue off of that perspective, Renelle, as you brought in the colonial, the imperial perspective. I want to read something that will sort of tie us back to the same level 4 heights that we were talking about, and that the point that we want to make is that this is not the first time this conversation has been happening. All right. So let me read a little bit from this book, a book I just got from one of the greatest leaders of our times, Desmond Tutu. God is not a Christian. All right. And he spoke specifically about it coming off of apartheid. And he said that his wish is a world to end the persecution of people because of their sexual orientation, which is every bit as unjust as that crime against humanity, apartheid. Now, he's an archbishop of the Anglican Church, coming off of an era of apartheid, and he has compared the two. But he has also compared it unapologetically, and he carried it further to now anchor it into the colonial framework that came with a lot of these religions, where he said, I could not have fought against the discrimination of apartheid and not also fight against the discriminations that homosexuals endure, even in our churches and faith groups. So I want that to kind of push us into level 4, 2.2. You know what I mean? And that sort of discussion of, okay, now you have a world leader, thinking that, take me away, guys. Carry me into level 5.
I will just start by saying it's so
Mario.
It's so good that you brought that up, right? And you also kind of bring up the idea of apartheid not in comparison or in parallel, but in conjunction with the idea of being homosexual, being LGBT, right? The thing is, we have to understand that all of any struggle, any movement, anything like that, there are intersections, because people don't just exist as one thing, right? If you are going to advocate for whether it is the Palestinian people or women and girls or LGBT people, you have to advocate for all of them, because our identities intersect, right? So
Narad saying something here. He's a
very good point. Bring it up, Victorian. Pull it up, and let's get into that.
Yeah, I will add a little bit to that, but I really wanna I can't let that go just like that, right?
Yeah.
So he says, stand to be corrected, but ain't Europe and the West are the ones who give homosexuals, etc., the most rights. So things could exist paradoxically sometimes. We live in the Caribbean, which is very, 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 very paradoxical at times, where you have extremes of hyper visibility of sexuality, carnival and juve and all of that. And then you have this very conservative kind of outlook. So the same way in different spaces, and in America, you have progression. You have liberal thought, liberal thinking, and so on, right? Yeah. I know you're just asking, yeah. So it happens like that, where you have opposing values, opposing thoughts and ideas, and paradoxes sometimes is actually very human and natural, right? Yeah. To exist in paradoxical spaces like that. So yes, they have come a long way as well, because there are Americans or North Americans who are anti-imperial. there are Europeans who try to deconstruct and debunk colonization and all of that
but
as
also
well.
quite the polar opposite.
But you have the polar opposite at the same time.
And when you think about it too, I mean, I think about it in terms of like this weird timeline scenario in the Caribbean, where it's like we as a past colonized region have been the receivers of all of this homophobia and heterosexism that still exists here. And then it's like, okay, once we got away from the colonizers and they went abroad and some of them started to decide, yes, you know what, we need to be more progressive, or we need to hold space for LGBT persons and all the people that we have damaged, right? But then we here are still struggling. And sometimes that is an argument that people, and I think this was something that Mr. Lancer brought up, that we trying to be
diplomatic, Scott. Mr. Lancer.
Mr. Lancer brought up, which is that we are trying to be more like the West, right? When it is that these things that we have been left with are actually Western, and we're trying to break free from them, right? Just these ways of thinking, right? It actually comes from that colonized space.
Yeah.
So like to play off some of that, as you say, like we trying to break free of this kind of thinking and stuff like that. One of the critiques that of that episode and us as a team and Height Room is that we should not give folks who share those views a platform, because like as you say, we're trying to break free of that kind of thinking and that mentality. And us as a team, we kind of discussed that, and we were like, well, I don't know how far do we want to go? Is that censorship just because we may disagree with what somebody says or not? But so how was that from your perspective, with the LGBTQ perspective, your friends?
Yeah.
Should we allow people like that?
I think this
ability to air their
4
views?
heights. What level we reach now? All year 5.
5.
I think this is 5.
5 heights here, right? Something that I really wanted to say about that, and Scott will continue. That I want you all to know that I am an ally. I'm a social justice warrior. I'm an advocate for human rights. That is my position. That's where I come from. That is what I do with Silver Lining. That is how I live my feminist life, etc., etc., etc. The Heights Room is not and has never said that they are a safe space. The Heights Room is not an NGO. The Heights Room here for Heights. They're here to talk. They're here to have a conversation. We understand, right? And having talks with you all as well, I want everybody to know out there that you all did understand and you all empathized, definitely, right? But I want people to see and know that there are different spaces, and even though the conversation went where it went, you still wanted to maintain a type of respectability and a space for people to talk and say what they have to say, right? So sometimes people would say things like, oh, well, you shouldn't even bring on them. You shouldn't even give them a platform. Sometimes you don't know. You don't know what people might bring to the platform. You don't know what they might say. You don't know how it might be responded to and whatnot, and how people would react. So, for example, if we do a live from Silver Lining, we know that what we stand for, we are a safe space. We are an NGO for XYZ, and we will have to be very much more aware and sensitive and so on to these matters, right? But I think that, like a lot of people said, this is the mentality in society. This is the way that Trinidadians think. So on the show, in the Heights Room, out of the show, on the street, in the school, all of these things, people will still say what they have to say. What we do here at the Silver Lining Foundation, we are trying to create a cultural, socio-cultural shift. And I think the Heights Room is also doing things like that, because I see you all as very progressive. I see you all as having conversations that need to be had, talking about taboo things and really providing a space for opposition, for advocacy, for allyship, for all these different things. And that is the whole gist of intersectionality as well. You have intersecting ideas and ideologies. We still live in a society where people are racist and things too. They'll come on our show and talk the racist talk. They come on our show and talk the colorist talk and all of this too. We have racism, classism, colorism, homophobia, sexism, and it is surrounding us, home, outside, social media, everywhere.
Yeah, and I will just say, I think Renelle pretty much took everything I was going to say. But what I will just say is, and Brandon said this just now, that we do not want our lives to be critiqued and to be debated. Especially when it's somebody that has no idea what this, well, I'm assuming that doesn't have any idea what this experience is like, because this is not your identity. You don't know, right? Life should not be debated. However, we understand that it will happen anyway. People will still be homophobic. People will still be sexist, racist, whatever it is. And sometimes, it just happens in different spaces and contexts, right? But, and Ronell brought up the point of intersectionality. And it's so important to note, right, that, I'm really hoping that he wouldn't critique something like the BLM or women's lives or migrant lives or anything like that, right? You wouldn't critique somebody's life like that, right? It's no different. And me saying that, I need to be very clear that I am not trying to put oppression on hierarchy. I'm not trying to put oppressions of different identities on hierarchies and compare trauma, right? And who's more entitled to this, who's more traumatized. That's not what I'm trying to say. I am trying to say that it's very similar in the sense that what you are doing is promoting harm, prejudice, stereotype, adding to that trauma, adding to that oppression. And we don't want that to happen anymore.
I like what Lily is saying. Lily is also part of the Silver Lining Foundation. If you want to pull up her message, you can do that as well. But it is really important. And I'll read it out. Lancer's personal beliefs and others like him, because we're not singling out this guy, are not just about a difference in opinion. It is rooted in the desire for a group of people to be annihilated. Hate doesn't deserve a platform for friendly discourse.
Of course. And that's the other thing I wanted to say is that he talked a lot about, not wanting to be cancelled, feeling like his opinions were being stifled. He didn't have freedom of speech. And the thing is, there are consequences to your actions. When you say harmful things, people are going to want to cancel you. And that's the truth. I mean, the same way he says he's a journalist, right? The same way that you have the power to write compelling stories and to gain a following, the same way that you could write a not so great story and lose a following.
Fair enough. Could we say that perhaps that then it might be worth having these people on so they could be exposed their views and then as such be cancelled? Or is it not, the risk is not worth it?
That's a good question, but
I am not a great fan or a supporter of cancel culture.
I'm not saying we're not fans of it. We don't support it
because I believe that people should be allowed to gather their knowledge and information, have a conversation, listen to others, change their mentality, empathize. Empathy, y'all. Emotional intelligence. That's all it takes.
However, I will say that y'all sometimes, people don't really want to debate their lives. Why would anybody really want to sit down with somebody and try to convince them that my existence is valid and that I have been through so much trauma, so much pain? I've felt the brunt of oppression, right? Why would anybody ever want to do that? So, it's like, how do we find, I guess what I'm saying is, I guess somebody needs to do it, of course, because these conversations need to be had. I will not be that person. I am not here to debate my life, my existence.
And no one should force Scott or any other member of the LGBTI community to come and say, hey, come and stand up for your rights and stand up for yourself and debate it and say what you had to say. So the whole gist of it is that why do we continue to have debates about persons' private lives, about what persons do with their bodies and their sexuality when it is not hurting or harming anyone? Why is it a debate? Why is homosexuality a debate? We do not debate racism, do we? Do we do that anymore? Yeah. Do we debate?
Yeah, people do.
Yeah, people
do. Yeah. And we had the questions. I can't remember who asked the question if we would bring a racist on. Me personally, I wouldn't talk with the team. You did. And I would say yeah. But Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, I would still like to point out that it's a perspective that where do you find the middle ground? Because a lot of the core context of Heights Room is having not only deep discussions but also having fringe discussions that aren't common to happen. And what we recognize in exploring different topics is that there are many different sides to the story, and in many sides to the story, everyone wants to feel, that they have an opportunity to say their sense, which is why we always take the position where we're not one side or the other. And one of the key things I wanted to point out is that you would notice that we were very specific not to call that episode a debate, but rather a discussion. Because if it was a debate, then none of the hosts would have been part of the discussion. You know what I mean? How we envisage it is literally. I remember when I meet Cutter in was it Pizza Hut, Cutter, in South Park, and we had that was the
Starbucks.
First,
Sadly.
Starbucks, and we was like, and we learned about.
It's so hipster.
I just laughing because he
It's so
remember what he did.
hipster.
Yeah,
Pizza boys. Rituals. I guess so.
Yeah, and I remember when we were talking about, we liken these conversations to, for me, you roll up a spliff, you're lining with some fellas, and you talk about, as we mentioned, the level 3, the level 4, the level 5 heights, the reasonings behind it. And what we get to realize is that everything on this world is part of what makes life worth living. You know what I mean? That everyone has a story. And in order to do that, one of the key things is not having that everyone could have a strong perspective, but that so long as it doesn't infringe on another person's rights, as in the last episode, we had a troll come up and Torian had to put him in his place, because he started to infringe on certain men, right? That's when we were getting involved. Once you start to do that, you understand what I'm saying? We here to carry the discussion further, because what we found is that, but what you would find is that depending on the discussion, certain things you would never think have another side. Like a lot of people I know don't actually know that Hitler actually was a self-professed original Christian. He actually thought himself to be one of the strongest, proponents of Christianity. And there's an entire following that looks at that perspective. So it's easy to take the normative perspective, which is Hitler was a crazy person, he was a murderer, he was a thing, which is easy. But there's also some unpacking to happen there, so long as they don't start to infringe on the rights of the people.
Of course, and that's a good point, because when you think about it, Hitler is studied because of his leadership style, his strategy, right? Yes, we know he did terrible crimes against humanity, but also that's just another perspective of it. Also, a lot of very unethical and harmful experiments happened during the Holocaust. A lot that still we don't know about as yet.
Also things with conversion therapy for homosexuals.
Right, all of that.
Correct.
But with a lot of very crazy, messed up, harmful, oppressive, traumatic things that happen in those experiments, a lot of scientific advancements came out of it as well, when you think about it.
And does it mean that it was good, it was okay, it was moral? No, it doesn't.
It was terrible. A lot of things, in history, there are so many things that may have not necessarily come out, or not necessarily that a terrible thing had to happen for something to evolve, but it happens all the time, and we hold space for that.
Yeah.
So, that episode was the brainchild of myself, of course, and many people would have seen me, take part in activities as an ally, which I am. And I mean, that would have come across strong in the episode. And it, as a platform, as a podcast, as a space, we are still hashing out where we really going with certain things, A lot of people were annoyed that I was not neutral and all of that. And I mean, we learn as we go along how to facilitate for such. My thing about it is that we are living in a reality where it is still up for debate. Sadly, it is sadly. And the thing is, it wasn't a debate. Now, this man come on to debate, and it wasn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be like, okay, what is your thoughts on this? When he come with all this thing about study, case study, Mr. Man from 1950s about gender and all kind of, couldn't get to the point. Up to now, I could not hear from him what makes it wrong. He said, well, you're not allowing me to talk. It's like, what when will you reach this point? And he could not, because he could not do what Scott said and just say, I don't like these people, right?
Well, yeah.
And if it was a debate and he was able to be matched on a debate, he would be destroyed. Because his points do not hold that level of skill at a debate. So, I know it would have seemed to a lot of people that, we give a platform to something, but at the same time, we moving towards, as you say, these fringe conversations that people will have. Because as Jillian said, racism, as much as it's not up for debate, obviously, it's still up for debate in plenty spaces for some reason. And then when we look at a lot of the colonial mindset that has sunk into our psyche and is championed by certain people, you get to realize that we still have a long way to go, and we can't pretend that we ain't had that place to go still now. And that's where I stand on it in terms of the nature of the conversation.
And before you I know somebody has a question here, and before you answer it, I just want to say that I did hear that part of the conversation where you bring up the studies and everything. And it's important to note, and it is always important to note, that scientific literacy is so important, because when I heard what he said, I could tell from the moment I heard it that this study he's talking about is coming from a biased place. And we will listen if we ourselves don't have, because not everybody goes to UE and does a course in scientific literacy, right? So of course, and that's fine, that is okay. I'm not saying that anybody is less or more because of that, right? But what I'm saying is that sometimes there are people in authority that we will listen to who also have biased opinions and will write these kinds of papers, do this kind of research, and then put their own moral perspective on it, right? And we need to be conscious of that, and we need to be wary of that, because it does a lot of harm.
Yes,
that's what
for sure.
Let me just say something about what you mentioned there about being an ally now, because I really want to applaud you and give you value, obviously, for coming on, so saying it here in this platform, in on your show, right? Because I think it's so important for you as a non-LGBTI person, for you as a straight man, right, to come out and say that you don't know how much value and how powerful, let me tell you as a man, a straight man, saying that is, and how touching it is for the LGBTI community out there to hear men like you say that. And that's what we want to foster. We want more people like that. And even though you want your show to be neutral and have that space for neutrality and this very unbiased conversations, you all still have your own personalities. You all are still who you are, and you should never and should not lose the essence of who you are. So it's good and it's okay. You don't have to be absolutely neutral. You sure could have that space, but you be who you are, because we value that and we respect that, and I like the Heights room for that.
I hear you.
Thanks, Cutter.
You're welcome, Torian. I'm always here for you.
And also there was no acknowledgement that research itself, of course, very good point.
We have some smart, intelligent people on the live here.
Right? So much research. And this is not to Ren and I consider ourselves to be academics. We go into UE, whatever, right? But and this is not to devalue our fields, but also that so much harm goes on within our field, has gone on in the past and still continues to up to this day. I always say I hold space for the state of psychology as it exists, because it's a work in progress that is still very conservative in some parts of the world, particularly here. It's still very conservative, and a lot of people still tend to have very morally biased, conservative type opinions that continue to promote harm. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Definitely. Somebody asked if we bring him back.
Yeah. So,
and I mean, judging from the you never know, but it's definitely not in that, because he had to come within the vibe now. Within the vibe we was trying to have, it was different. It was a whole different vibe he brought that we just wasn't looking for that debate, But I mean, if I bring him back, I bring him back with a man to debate him, and a real debate. You understand? In a debate. Nobody talking and trying to debate style thing. Fight night. You understand?
Rebuttals. 1 minute.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that kind of thing. Because that's what he wants, clearly, you know, and that's what he will have to
I
be,
think
you know?
I think one of the things that come clear is that and just keep context, guys, that this is what episode 23 of us doing Heights Room in this format. I mean, we now start, guys. You know what I mean? And in now starting at the end of the last quarter, one need to realize is as you unpack Heights, you get different types of episodes emerging. And as you
Very natural.
touch on certain polarizing topics, what me and Kota and Torian pointed out is that what we call the episodes. And this quarter we have 2 nuclear episodes for you all that you know will shock everyone, you know, and be just as nuclear, if not even more nuclear. But what we get to realize is that those sort of discussions, there's a certain structure that works well with it. You know what I mean? And perhaps a debate style function or debate style structure may work better with it. But the problem with that is that the 3 hosts have so much to add to the conversation as well. In debates, normally you just kind of pull back and you let one say it to the other, that kind of thing. So I mean, it's something that is almost like a hybrid debate kind of thing.
I think if we ever do a debate, me and you have to sit down outside. And Torian, we have to train to be the moderator. We could train Torian to be the great debate hoster. And yeah. Yo, down and out.
Okay. Kevin has a good question here, you all. Check him out now.
Let's get some questions too. If you have any questions.
Kevin actually worked with me Kevin was my intern in 2016. Big up Kevin for supporting me.
Nice.
Right. Now, based on the response of the lack of cooperation of the educational institution, do you believe that this may be a result of the fear of acceptance?
Definitely, but I also think to talk about this is so layered, and this is Heights in and of itself, because I think that.
Well, you're coming back, you know, so you know, give it a little touch now, and we go keep it for next time.
Yeah,
touch it a little bit.
I think it has to do with the fear of acceptance, but also hegemonies that exist because of our colonial past. You know, for instance, and I didn't really get to talk about it before, but to give you an idea, of course, I went to the prestigious all boys Catholic school.
College?
I'd really like to tell people in here, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But,
wait to ally, Renel. Wait to ally.
And of course, you know, I had a very terrible experience where an injustice was done to me, I would say, because, you know, I finished CSEC. I wanted to come back for Cape, and I knew what I wanted to study. I think it was Spanish, bio, and environmental studies. I was like, yes, I was a science man.
What is that?
I wanted to be a science man. I remember I applied. I never got through. Waiting. All my friends here and back. I seen everybody posting about, they get through Cape, whatever, Form 6. And all of a sudden, so I remember my mother had called the school and they were like, what's going on? Like, why haven't we heard back? And that ended up with me being in a meeting with the Form 5 dean, the Form 6 dean, my parents, and the principal of the school.
Such injustice, criminalized, you know?
Because I had posted a photos actually of me and my current boyfriend at the time, and it was like a big deal because it was like, this is like, how could you do this? You have to understand how it reflects on your peers and the school and whatever. And of course, at the time too, I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was already in this place where I was young, and I was like, already in this space where, like, in a prestigious school, you know, and escape. And you know, I want to continue, right? Because I don't know what else I'm gonna do. So you know, I just kind of had to be like, suck it up and say, right, you know what, I'll never do it again. I'm sorry. And then the next, I didn't even end up getting my subjects because, and I think it's because of how long they had me waiting, and they really told me, well, it's because they didn't have the grades to do it. But then when I had asked people around me who was doing the subjects I wanted to do, they were saying, I get the same grade as you, or a lower grade than you. And I was like, this is clearly, I speculate, right? This is clearly an injustice, you know?
And a lot of people, I mean, that's so sad, Scott. I mean, that is something a lot of people don't understand. How competitive the education sector is in Trinidad. And something like that, where you're supposed to be, you know, spending, because Trinidad and Tobago has Reggie Point. I always talk to my sister about that because she's 9 years younger than us. And I always talk about, well, in my time, I only went one lesson. And in she time, lessons had to be every day. And it's like, that's like the norm. It's so ultra competitive. And I always think, well, being so ultra competitive, to have to battle that kind of discrimination and have to now perform at that level of academics, that had to be such a frustrating experience to have to go through. And I mean, a lot of people don't understand the effect of bullying and how, all the different forms that it takes and how it could affect somebody. I mean, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? And of course, they will hide behind that sort of church structure and that kind of thing and say, well, we would be, continue to be.
All right, so we just want to take some quick questions because we're looking to close up. So let's just hear Jason out. Do you think we will make any headway in the legal infrastructure for the acceptance of the LGBTQ community? We know about what happened with the striking of the buggery law. Do you all, I mean, just give us a quick view. What do you all think is in store for that area?
Okay, so what that did, so that was 2018 and Katayu was there. We know about it, we know what happened, everybody make a big joke about it and whatnot, but it was just a beginning of breaking down a very old colonial law that, let me be very specific about it, was not only, in that law there was nothing said about homosexuality and being gay and queer and the LGBTI community. Remember, this is old colonial laws, right? That England and thing repealed since 1960 something or whatever, right? 1860 something or whatever it was, right? But again, that law was struck down to kind of make way for others to be redefined and reformed and whatnot. Like a stepping stone. When we speak to Faris, when we spoke to him, we say, well, I can't do nothing about that something because I have 20-something laws behind that, right? So like Omar is saying here, we need to amend the EOA, which is the Equal Opportunity Act.
Definitely.
The Equal Opportunity Commission is their mission, that is their vision, that is their plan to amend that Equal Opportunity Act, where KAISO, another LGBTI NGO, they had a campaign, Add All Three, where they are calling for the EOA and the EOC and whatnot to add things such as sexual orientation, HIV status, and age, right? Where persons should not be discriminated against based on these three things that they have not acknowledged. Being discriminated against based on your sex or your gender is different from your sexual orientation. Do you know that an employer could say, hey, your HIV status is positive, so I ain't going to hire you? There's no law. You can't bring that person to court and say, well, you can't do me that. There is no law, right? So the EOA, Equal Opportunity Act, is very important. If we amend that and add all three and change that, that could then influence the legal framework and the legal structure. But keep in mind, Ollie, let me tell you, all the laws could change in this land. Yeah. All the laws could change in this country. Legalizing, decriminalizing, weed, homosexuality, whatever. If the social and cultural mindset and ideas of the people don't change, people just be breaking the law.
Of course.
Right?
Well, we are seeing what's happening right now.
Right. Because look at weed and marijuana. It is decriminalized, not legalized. People still have the taboos about it. People still demonize. People still have these unfounded things like going to fry your brain and this and that and whatever. So it's the very same way. If you do not have that deep understanding of the thing that you are trying to bring a cultural shift about, you could change all the laws of the land, the mindset, the culture, the colonized way of thinking. It will not make a difference in the people.
Yeah, and
lastly, yes, Scott.
Oh, I was just gonna say. What was I gonna say? What were we talking about?
I'm sorry.
No.
I know how it is. Trust me. Trust me, I know what's going on
what
there.
I was gonna say is notice what we're talking about. We're talking about things like the Equal Opportunity Act. We're not talking about marriage between same-sex persons.
Good point.
Because that's not really that's not our sole focus right now. What we really just want It's
to
to
live
be
and
safe.
survive.
We want to be safe
To
and to
live,
have rights.
to survive,
Yeah.
have basic rights, be able to work.
Yeah.
The gay community, LGBT community, and saying we want everything handed
It's basic rights,
wanna-
not dog.
Right, let me get a job, let me work. We are smart, we're intelligent, we're educated, we are professionals, right?
Yeah.
Because they are. That is all they're asking for, nothing more than that. Who talking about marriage and think, oh God, they want to marry, they want to marry, no, they want to marry. Why young people don't even want to get married these days? What is that? That's patriarchal colonial thinking. Out with that too, you know?
You know?
Okay,
Now, lastly, we have what data you all could share with us about the school situation. So what you maybe not share it today, but maybe you all could use this now as a platform for you all to let people know if you all could put out certain infographics about it on Silverline or something that people would like to know what is really going on with the stats out there now. You know?
For sure, Omar, thanks for your question. Like I said, Omar, he helped us a lot when he was working with UNESCO to get into the system. So we are going to have the official launch of the 2019 School Climate Survey. August 25th. Yeah, I think so. August 25th, 10 a.m. Lily, you could come back with the info if you want to. You all stay posted to all our socials. It is being publicly released to all our stakeholders, citizens, anybody who wants to actually come and hear about it. We will have everything. We are all about transparency here at the Silver Lining Foundation, right? We will have everything, the report itself on our website, silverliningfoundation.com. We will also have graphics and all of that because we're doing real work for this right now. Lily and them doing real work. Big up Lily and the social media and communications team. So we'll have that. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Check out the website. Everything is going to be there. Listen, come into the launch if you want, you know, and hear what we have to say because we will be releasing the data, the facts. Right, the facts as it came from the kids, the students in the schools. Not what we think, not what we want to think or we want to tell the people. But this is what these young people have to say. This is their experience. This is the data. We gathered the data. We did the analysis, qualitative, quantitative analysis, right? So we really try to do it in such a way that was holistic.
That is what we lack in Trinidad.
It's quite an extensive document.
Quite extensive.
I mean, a lot of schools, a lot of children. I was part of the data input, and it took very long. So
but
you know,
it's needed. It's needed.
And it's very much needed. Yeah, of course.
You know how hard it is to find data about important things in Trinidad when we're trying to find research on things. It's like dog. So, you know, it's be crazy.
And it also, I mean, that is also a part of that has to do with the emphasis that we put on research and the idea of research and how much we value it. But that's our next
That's our next So that is our next heights definitely that we will get into because we will have you guys back. Renell and the psychtivist. You understand? Scott himself. All right. I want to thank everybody for all their inputs. I know early in the show we crossed 100, right? So if it's one thing, all it was early in the show to say you have crossed 100 comments, you know. So like I don't know how much that so far, but we update. All on our next level two outside there, level 5 with the comments, right? Right. So I want to thank Renell and Scott once again for taking the time. I want to thank all of you in the comments. Of course, my co-hosts Torian and Shankara. Okay. Lastly, I just want to leave you all with the understanding that, you know, humanity must always prevail. All right? Correct. That is what we hear for at the Heights Room, that the humanity of people. Well, I ain't that, right? All right? Okay. All right. So we're looking out for August the 25th. All right? 10 a.m. Facebook Live, Zoom. Get there. All right? Silver Lining Foundation. You all could follow them on Instagram, on Facebook, go to their website. All right. Want to thank everybody else for all the beautiful questions and so on. All right. Comments. Let's see anything I say from Micronesia there, bro.
Well, boy, you know what I mean? The sun, I was in the Pacific, west of Hawaii. It is Thursday. So big up on Thursday at 1 p.m. from over here, you know what I mean?
In the future.
on, Shankar.
Yeah, so I need future.
No, he's not.
No. I out here in the Pacific,
That's
you
all
know what I mean?
you right down
No,
All right.
I fly
So,
in the
goodbye from the
Polynesian
past,
South Pacific.
Shankara.
Big up
Goodbye
yourself.
from the past.
Correct. All
Goodbye from the
future,
past.
depending on how you look at it. That's heights by
Or the
itself.
future. Or the future. Next time. All right, people. From all of us here,
Yes,
signing
I-
out. Blessed love.
Big up.
Blessed.
Blessings. Yeah.